Welcome to this episode of our program Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing an important topic or the topic of the day, and we're speaking about a topic that has been the main center or taking the center stage of all topics during the past period, which is the economic repercussions that has been reflecting on the whole globe and how Egypt is dealing with these repercussions. Egypt has already reviewed plans with the economic impacts of the Russia-Ukraine crisis and what it could be possibly facing. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi already directed on March 15 the Egyptian armed forces to offer basic food commodities to the neediest at reduced prices in coordination with the Ministry of Supply and Internal Trade and the Long Live Egypt Fund. The president also asked, or rather he directed the government to set the price for the unsubsidized bread in a bid to reduce its price hike, and asked the Rational Investigation Office affiliated with the Ministry of Supply and Internal Trade to ensure the implementation of the new pricing. The president has already allocated or gave instructions to the government to allocate around 130 billion pounds in order to be able to counter the repercussions on the Egyptian economy. Already the Ministry of Interior launched the second phase, or the rather the latest phase of the All of Us Are One initiative aimed at reducing the prices, and the activities consist of many issues, including the providing of food commodities at discounted prices in a number of outlets to fight the monopoly, and all that would be is being held under the auspices of the president for a period of 30 days. Moreover, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli today inaugurated the Ahlan Ramadan, or Welcome Ramadan exhibition, which was held this morning, and which included 165 companies and products from different brands that are selling the basic commodities and goods at the right price, and that he gave a speech in which he spoke, or he briefed people on this situation in a very transparent and objective way. He dealt with every aspect and how Egypt dealt with every aspect during this exhibition, or during his speech while inaugurating or after inaugurating this exhibition. Economic experts are saying that 50% of the increase in the inflation rates in Egypt is related to the worldwide inflation resulting from this Ukraine, or the Russian-Ukraine crisis, as the whole world. We'll be speaking about that tonight with our guest, Dr. Maewa Sherif, Professor of Economics. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Right. Before we delve into our discussion, let me first take the top stories of the day. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi today received a phone call from his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, where they discussed the latest developments in the Ukrainian crisis. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said that the Ukrainian president briefed President Sisi on the latest developments in the talks track. During the phone talk, the president stressed the importance of pushing for peaceful solutions, expressing Egypt's support for the efforts exerted to solve the current crisis through negotiations. On his part, Zelensky expressed his appreciation and gratitude for Egyptian efforts in extending the residency of the strapped Ukrainian tourists in Egypt. And And on our top stories, or the second stop stories of the day, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi made an inspection visit this morning to the headquarters of the police academy, where he was received by General Mahmoud Tawfiq, Minister of Interior, and leaders of the police academy. The President's visits to the police academy comes within the framework of his keenness to follow up the were the words of the President.
الباعة الجائلين اعمل لي محلات. قلت له ايوه اعمل محلات وخد الناس الباعة الجائلين دول حطهم في المحلات. مش كده اللي حصل؟ لو انت رحت على الباعة الجائلين دلوقتي اللي على طريق مصر اسكندريه الصحراوي ده اللي على اليمين والشمال دول هتلاقيهم ان هم كانوا موجودين في الاول واقفين اي حاجه كده يعني. لازم نرقي نفسنا ونغير حياه الناس بفكر. The President has spoke to the new cadets to the police academy and briefed them on the developments, on the national and international developments and crises facing the whole world, as well as the developments in the internal arena, where he spoke how that reflects on Egypt and the repercussions on the Egyptian economy at large, and how Egypt is dealing with the situation. The President also spoke about or inspected the training courses of the new cadets in order to follow up himself the courses and the capabilities of the new students. The President also spoke to the students on their role at this upcoming stage, and at the end of the visit, the President talked to the parents of the students who were visiting the headquarters at this very particular day, thanked them and praised their role in raising up those students who will be the protectors of their country at future times, with the brave or their brave colleagues of the armed forces.
حضرتك دلوقتي ما اتعاملتش بالقوه ان انا هشيل الناس دي مش من هنا، لا حضرتك فكرت فيه الاول كبني ادم قبل ما نفكر في الحل، وده في حد ذاته حاجه يعني تدل ان احنا تحت قياده عظيمه بجد. احنا مع بعض يا فندم هنقدر
Right, before we start with our discussion, let me first take this report and President Sisi addressing the or marking Mother's Day and giving statements illustrating on the developments in Egypt and after honoring the mothers on this very particular day. Let's watch.
Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, Prime Minister, accompanied by Dr. Ali al-Musalhi, Minister of Supply and Internal Trade, Niveen Gama, Minister of Trade and Industry, Major General Khalid Abdel Al, Governor of Cairo, and Engineer Ayman Husam-Eddin, Head of the Consumer Protection Agency, witnessed the opening of the main exhibition of Welcome Ramadan, which will run from March 24th till the 31st of March. At the Cairo International Conference Center in Nasr City, in the presence of a number of representatives of the General Federation of Chambers of Commerce and officials of the concerned authorities. The Prime Minister began his tour to the exhibition by affirming the state's keenness to make all possible efforts to provide various basic commodities and food products to citizens, and to make measures related to supporting the neediest groups in implementation of the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in this regard, especially with the approaching month of Ramadan. He added that the president also gave his directives to coordinate between the various ministries, the armed forces, and the concerned authorities to distribute Ramadan cartons that include basic food items, which the government worked to implement immediately through coordination with these authorities. The government also worked to bring the date of organizing a series of exhibitions welcome this year earlier before the holy month of Ramadan in all governorates across Egypt. And there are strolling cars that began roaming the Egyptian villages to provide all the goods and food products needed by the citizens at reduced prices. Dr. Madbouli also stressed that there are great efforts made by the government to provide a strategic reserve of basic commodities in order to reassure citizens of the availability of various commodities and food products across Egypt. During his inspection of the booths with products and goods throughout the Welcome Ramadan exhibition, the Prime Minister conducted a dialogue with a number of representatives of the exhibiting authorities and companies and was assured of the existence of special discounts, offers, and prices that meet the various needs of citizens and was briefed on the contents of Ramadan cartons to ensure it includes the basic commodities that the citizen needs. In a press conference after the inauguration of the exhibition, Madbouli added that the exhibition covers an area of 12,000 square meters, and there are more than 165 companies offering goods at prices accessible to all citizens. The Prime Minister said that he reviewed with the ministers and the Chamber of Commerce the size of the outlets that will be available to citizens across Egypt, that will approach 8,000 before the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan, and all of them display prices and goods with the same rate. Madbouli said that there are presidential directives to continue the Welcome Ramadan exhibitions beyond the holy month to provide goods to citizens at reduced prices. Madbouli also referred to what President El-Sisi emphasized, that the Egyptian state was able, with good and proper planning, to build sufficient reserves of basic commodities in a way that enabled us today, in light of this unprecedented global crisis, to be able to absorb the repercussions of this crisis. And moving, thanks to what we have of sufficient stock of goods, will secure us for the coming months. The Prime Minister said that the government implement the President's directives to provide a large reserve in the next budget, amounting to £130 billion to absorb the largest part of the shocks. He said that no country, regardless of its capabilities, cannot fully bear all the costs of the shocks. He stressed that they have always bear in mind the need to preserve the gains of economic reform that have been achieved and to keep the state running at positive growth rates. He stressed that the state plans and visualizes the current situation until the end of this year, assuming the continuation of the crisis. He said that Egypt spoke with the IMF that in addition to the agreed technical support, there may be a potential need for a financing component, which we request in the event of a need for additional financing in the future to be able to obtain the shock within the framework of our planning and anticipation of the prolongation of the Russian crisis. The Prime Minister also stressed the importance of rationalizing consumption in preserving our dollar resources.
Right, welcome back, and let me start our discussion. Of course, this was the inauguration of the Welcome Ramadan exhibition by the Prime Minister this morning. Later on, we'll take the statements of the President while calling on people to rationalize their or what they are consuming during the upcoming period, even though that he spoke objectively of not having a real problem at this very particular time. Let me start with our discussion, and let me welcome again our guest, Dr. Maewa Sherif, Professor of Economics. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And we've just seen the inauguration today of the Prime Minister to welcome Ramadan exhibition. Let's read a little bit of what the Prime Minister spoke about, because the Prime Minister today spoke very frankly about the situation that is in Egypt and is facing the whole world, but he stressed on Egypt. Here the Prime Minister said at the very beginning that this exhibition is made with an aim of giving the citizens the chance to be able to get the basic goods and commodities at an affordable prices, not or easing the burden on the shoulders of the citizens. So let me take here your reading to such exhibition and the efforts that were made before the, for an instant, initiative of we are all in, we're all one. This initiative, plus of course other instructions. How do you view those initiatives at the past period?
Okay, it all comes from the Russia and Ukraine crisis and the expectations of the reduction of the gross domestic product, the global one, all over the world for around 10%, and an increase in inflation for this year 3% and next year for 2%. So there is a global wave of inflation across the whole world, and one of them is Egypt. So Egypt is taking like macroeconomic stability procedures, and starting from, we call it the core commodities, so food and fuel. So as Mr. Vice President, he emphasized on that all core products and basic products will be at stabilization of the prices, and there will be support from the Ministry of Finance regarding that. So it will work as a shield of around $8 billion to finance those products and to maintain the price stability for the basic needs, specifically for the most vulnerable and the fragile sectors in our economy. Mm-hmm. So this is for the Ministry of Finance action, as well as also some contribution from the monetary policy side and its tools. So as we see in the past days, there is lots of procedures from the authority regarding the interest rate, regarding,
yes.
Yeah.
But before we go into the monetary, the monetary system or the Central Bank of Egypt, let me here take or return back to steps and measures that were taken by the state in order to avert or that stands as a shield, as you said respectively here, for any world shocks.
Around from 3 or 4 years back, we had our imports for many products for around $80 billion, and the export was 18, so we have a gap of 64. But nowadays it has been improving quite a lot. And this is because of the strategy of import substitution in many fields, and among them is food products. So we have right now more than 1.5 million fedans, so they are recultivated and rehabilitated to support this food crisis. So we are moving from import substitution strategy, and then it is saturated, and then we move into export promotion strategy. So instead of importing some products, we are now exporting, such as in energy field.
Yes, you're speaking about the overall strategy, yeah, and this reform program that started with many measures that have been taken throughout the past few years. Indeed, except for this reform program, we couldn't have had this life breath that happened during the pandemic, and how we overcame the repercussions of the pandemic. Now we're speaking about a crisis that nobody in this world has expected. We're speaking about a very sudden development to incidents taking us to a war between one big country like Russia and Ukraine, and both are exporters of wheat and energy, gas and oil. So if we speak about how Egypt averted the repercussions, for an instance, the wheat, the bread. So how do you view how Egypt dealt so far with this issue and with providing the commodities with the affordable prices so far?
So far, we are secured for around 4 months in terms of wheat. And as I have just mentioned, we have recultivation of 1.5 million feddan for just rehabilitation of wheat. So once these 4 months will be ended, so we will be ready to get the crops. And I don't think that we will have a problem in regards of wheat aspects.
I think diversifying our sources of importing wheat, that is, of course, until we successfully have our own crops, definitely, of the wheat, which will be in 4 months. Do you think that diversifying our resources was beneficial, and how do you view such a precautionary step?
Of course, the foreign policy or trade policy, it is based on diversification. So we are diversifying the sources of food products, of our exports, of our imports from different sources to be protected. So diversification, of course, is one of our main policy regarding that.
How do you view how we worked or are working on controlling prices? Of course, you've been seeing what is happening worldwide and how prices hiked to enormous skyrocketing limits during the past period. So how do you view how Egypt dealt with this issue step by step in order to be able to lift the burden from the citizens?
As it is defined in macroeconomics theories and models, that inflation is a monetary phenomena and it must be solved with a monetary policy. So we use all the tools of monetary policy to control this increase in the inflation rate. We have an inflation target of Egypt of 7% plus or minus 2, so we'd like to keep in control within those range. So we use all the tools, starting from the devaluation of the currency. So we saw in last Monday that the value of dollar against the Egyptian pound, it jumps overnight from 15.7 into around 18.2. So we use the devaluation of the currency so to keep the competitiveness of the Egyptian market in terms of its export abroad attractive to other countries. Also, this devaluation of the currency attached with the increase in the interest rate. So we have a 100-point increase, which means 1% on deposit. So it reached up to 10.25% for deposit, and for loan 9.25 for deposit and 10.25 for loan as an interest rate. So that maintains the real interest rate positive, because real interest rate is a nominal one adjusted by inflation rate. So when we have high level of real interest rate, so that keeps that positive, which attracts the foreign direct investment into our country, as well as the remittances.
You pinpointed your finger on a very important issue, which we are will come back to that issue, which is the interest rates and the monetary policy, because this is a very, very particular that people really want to understand why the dollar just rose at that in one day, and how did that reflect on Egypt, and how Egypt worked on averting the repercussions of such a rise of the dollar. We'll be speaking about that, but before we go, before we continue on with our discussion, let's first have this second report and the President Sisi's statements during Mother's Day. Let's watch.
Options should rationalize food consumption during the upcoming holy month of Ramadan, which is usually characterized by increased consumption. He noted that there is no problem with goods inside Egypt and will not be during the month of Ramadan. President El-Sisi made the remarks during a ceremony to honor Egyptian women held on Wednesday in celebration of Mother's Day. The president said that he himself rationalizes consumption, indicating that balanced rationalization is important regardless of the amount of money one has. The president asserted that there is no problem in the needs and there is abundance, praising the state's efforts, citing the role of the state's national projects in increasing strategic stockpiles. He said that the Russian-Ukrainian war is a major crisis with economic impacts on the whole world, expressing his wishes for the war to come to an end. He pointed out that if it had not been for the implementation of the economic reform program, the situation in light of the current global economic crisis would have been very difficult. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli said that Egypt is capable of overcoming the current price hike crisis as well as the repercussions of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and is ready for all scenarios, even the worst-case scenario of a prolonged crisis. Moreover, the Ministry of Finance approved on the same day a package of financial and social protection procedures worth 130 billion Egyptian pounds to address the ongoing global economic challenges and their repercussions. Ahead of Ramadan, which set to start in early April and typically sees an increase in the rate of food consumption, Egypt has been calling for the rationalization of consumption to ensure that food commodities are secured in the local market throughout the whole month. Egypt formed a crisis committee earlier in March to confront the impacts of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, similar to committee formed when the coronavirus pandemic hit the country in 2020, with the aim to continuously assessing the repercussions of the crisis, especially on the country's strategic commodities. The emergency plan aims to curb prices and prevent food shortages, while penalizing those who exploit the crisis to raise prices unjustifiably. Egypt's armed forces has launched a nationwide campaign to provide low-cost food commodities to help reduce the burden of hiking prices on Egyptians ahead of Ramadan. Nearly 80% of Egypt's consumed wheat comes from Russia and Ukraine, whereas the latter recently announced that it will no longer be exporting commodities.
Well, welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Marwa. And we're speaking about this very important particular issue, which is the sudden rise of the dollar. People did not understand that, and of course they got this, or they were panicked. Mm-hmm. However, in a way or another, we were able to grasp the situation and start dealing with it. So please illustrate so as people would really understand what happened and what were the measures that we have taken in order to avert a crisis in that domain.
Okay. Of course, when we have any crisis, whether it's financial crisis, banking crisis, or political crisis, so the authority should be taking some regulations or rules or some kind of precautionary actions to support that crisis, to protect the whole economy from depressions. So above them was the devaluation of the currency, so meaning that the free float of the Egyptian pound, so the government will take off any control over the value of our currency against all other currencies. So we leave the Egyptian pound to find its way and to find its value against other currencies. So when we do that, we found that devaluation of the currency, so this is a reduction in the value of the currency, as we have said, so 18% reduction overnight. And that is in favor of Egypt, because that means when we have devaluation of the currency, so the Egyptian pound become more cheap against other currencies. So that support our export. Our export will be more cheap to other currencies, and that increases the competitiveness of our export when compared to other countries. Mm-hmm.
The Prime Minister today spoke about approaching the IMF in order to be able to make a new deal. Mm-hmm. Please try to make people understand what exactly, why are we doing that? Why are we approaching the IMF again? How beneficial would that be to Egypt?
Mm-hmm. The monetary policy tools, as we have mentioned, starts with the devaluation of the currency controlled by interest rate and the export and import, which is trade policy. And then the last arena is to ask for funding from the IMF. So International Monetary Fund is the international organization which is responsible to support any country at crisis. At 2016, when we asked for the fund, a loan of $12 billion, and we received the acceptance of that out of the IMF on 4 basic installments. And this is to support the Egyptian economy in the industry sector and in many manufacturing sector, in education, and in many pillars of the economy. And we had that at very low interest rate compared to interbank or intergovernmental loans from other countries. So because we take a precautionary policies, so Egypt is one more time is asking for the support of the IMF towards any crisis that could happen in our economy.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind telling us, we have, because people are saying that we, referring to the IMF, would not benefit Egypt as or would not be of real benefit to Egypt. Some people, you know, were at odds with the issue of referring to the IMF. From your point of view as an economic professor, how has that become an inevitable step that we have to deal with?
Sometimes you have...
I'm not speaking just about Egypt, by the way, because I'm speaking about the whole world, referring to such a policy.
And maybe that because when IMF gives support, so on the other hand, they have a package of reformation strategies, such as taxes, to increase the taxes and to remove all the subsidies, specifically in the fuel and oil subsidies, to reduce the government services to the households. To have like devaluation of the currency, to keep the government hands off many aspects of the economy, and to redirect the economy into free economy. So to lower the government intervention over the economic indicators. So maybe the people that they are not supporting the idea behind the IMF because they don't want an international institution, they interfere in our internal affairs.
Mm-hmm. So, my question was, why do we have to refer to such a step, and how the whole world are referring to that, despite despite the all what you spoke about, and what measures are we taking in order to avert applying such harsh measures?
So we are expecting that even with those precautions and those policies and those tools, maybe we'll not be having a full control of inflation rate, which could reach up as in 2016 to more than 33%. So that's why we have like another plan through an international organization to support for any consequences and repercussions of that political and economic crisis that is hitting not only Egypt, but it is hitting the entire economy. So maybe at that time we need a support from one of those international institutions.
Finally, I have 1 minute left for me here. And Dr. Maewa, from your point of view, what should be done at this upcoming stage? 1 minute.
It needs responsibility and sustainability from all sides, from household side to rationalize their consumptions and to remove the consumption pattern for only core products and mandatory products. It requires from the business firm to stabilize their prices and look for cost reduction ingredients to reduce the prices, and it requires monitoring and follow-up from the government to maintain the price level as it should be.
You said it all. Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Maewa Sherif, Professor of Economics, thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching, and till Sunday with other debate. Good night.